This is Suit Up Sports. Suit Up Sports. Where opinions are as sharp as a tailored suit. No fluff, no gimmicks, just unfiltered, hard-hitting takes on sports and a whole lot more. It's time to suit up. Now here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome to Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout, along with 10-year NFL vet Frank Garcia. Frank, how you doing?
I'm doing great, buddy. Good to be back, and I'm looking forward to it. We got a lot to get into today.
We sure do, man. NFL draft, little Hurricane, who I'm representing today.
Had a big game last night.
5-3, another win, and NBA playoffs. We actually texted yesterday about NBA, which we never do because we never really watch it like we used to, but the playoffs.
We'll get into that.
We'll get into that. Bring us back to old school NBA. It's great. But I heard you won another flag football 8-year-old championship yesterday.
Well, you know, as you and I were going back and forth on our credentials on what we're capable of and what we're just really aware of. We're getting ready to play a football game with my son, who's 8 years old, and there's a coach that is on the other side that is very competitive as well. And him and I have not had the best of a conversation.
How many times have you played him so far this year?
3. Well, we played him 3 times in the last 2 years.
And what's your record against them?
3-0.
Okay, so that starts a little.
They're a really good team. Yeah, and they had some really good players. And this guy is really keeps his stats in softball good. Right? He wants to be. Make it seem like it's a lot bigger, really, than what we're doing is just 8-year-old football, flag football.
Right.
He's videoing. I'm sure he's getting his kids to watch film. He's doing all the things, drawing up plays, all the things that coaches do that are trying to be the next Panthers head coach. But him and I have not. If you know me, what you do, you chirp off, you start popping off at our kids. That's pass interference. He tackled. I said, my reaction.
You're gonna come back a little bit. Yeah.
Stop talking to our kids. Coach your kids. Let me coach.
Which I would do the same thing.
Right. And it's just really that simple.
Yep.
He doesn't like anybody challenge him. He's a bigger guy, and he's not used to other coaches stepping up and challenging him. Well, I'm not going to back down.
Right.
Well, after the game, after we beat them again. He comes and tries, we're shaking hands, kids in the hand line, and I just know it's going to be bad if I engage with him.
Yeah.
Right. I just know it because we had an issue the year before where, I said something, he said something. It was probably both of us over the line a little bit in front of the kids. And, I took a step back from that and I made my mistake. But in this situation, I just knew I was going to have to shake hands with him. And I just avoided him, and he runs over there. And he grabs my hand, and he's trying to give me the old, squeeze, attaboy, buddy, try to make it look good. And he squeezed my hand, and I tried my best not to squeeze back. But when I squeezed back, I saw him go like that, and then he yanked his hand away, and then he realized, okay, I can't let him. He tried to jump on my back and hug me. Like, oh, yeah.
But doing it like he was being funny, but he wasn't being funny?
Right. He was trying to shake me down. So I turn around and I give him an elbow right to the chest. And I'm like, I'm not your girlfriend. You don't get to hug me just because you feel like it. Right? I'm not receptive of that. So get off of me.
Get off.
And then he goes,
no means no. Get off.
Yeah.
Get off.
I have every right to say no means no. Me. You should have learned that in high school or college.
Come on, dude.
But he goes, ref, he elbowed me. He starts trying to make a big deal about it and bring it to the parents and bring it to
my God.
And making a bigger deal about it. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And all the other coaches and everybody else was there. I said, give it a break, buddy.
Yeah.
You're just a bag of wind, really. And that was the end of it. But just another victory against a team that tried to step up to the mic and got knocked down, couldn't handle the heat.
Well, I do know that when Frank and I coached flag football together back when our boys were 8 years old, 9 years old. So this is a long time ago because they're all like in college or out of college. We never lost a game in 2 years. Yep. And there was always coaches like that. And, I as feisty as I can be, I don't talk to umpires in a mean way usually.
Definitely don't talk to the other team.
Yeah, don't talk to the other team. But yeah, if the coach wants to start crap, then and I've coached against you before and I've coached with you, and I've never seen you ever lay a hand on another coach, much less. I mean, I've seen you argue and talk smack with guys that talk to your team and vice versa, but never.
I'm going to defend my players for sure.
100%, which is what everybody should want in a coach. Now, let's get to something that everyone maybe didn't want. And that's the Panthers draft. By the way, Ricky Raines is going to join us again here in about 45 minutes to recap some of these drafts. He knows every player, every stat. It's great, especially after a draft, to kind of learn a little bit more about some of these guys. But first round, Panthers are drafting. It starts off with a bang where, Jacksonville trades up with Cleveland. They take Travis Hunter. They say, Travis Hunter, you're going to play both ways for us, buddy. You are going to play corner. You are going to play receiver. So they draft him. Cleveland stays where they are, or trades with Jacksonville. They get Mason Graham, who a lot of Panther fans, and it sounds like the Panthers were hoping that maybe he would be there at number 8. Regardless, the board's fallen very nicely for the Panthers. And at number 8, Jalen Walker sitting there, which is a guy that the majority of mock drafts had us taking. Everybody knows the need the Panthers have for defense, worst ever in the NFL last year. You've heard it a million times. We all know that. You also had Tet McMillan. He wants to go by T-Mac McMillan, the 6'5" receiver from Arizona who catches everything. And everyone had him number 1 or 2 on the receiver boards. And he was sitting there. And so everyone's kind of wondering what the Panthers are going to do. I would have bet you $1 million Jalen Walker. I think everyone that I was texting with was thinking probably Jalen Walker. I know that you and I would not have minded Tyler Warren, and he was there too. But the Panthers take T-Mac McMillan, and the reactions were obviously 50-50. There was a lot of people and a lot of analysts that thought it was a great trade or a great pick. And then there was a lot of fans who wanted defense and a lot of analysts who thought defense. My first initial reaction was I was mad because I felt we needed defense, and everything that we had been reading about Jalen Walker and the scouts we talked to made it sound like this kid's going to be a player. So that's what bothered me. And I thought that there were some good receivers in the second round, third round that maybe we could get, not saying they were on his level. But it's also a deep defensive draft, especially at defensive end. And so the Panthers must have felt that the depth at defensive end is better in the second, third round. And they think this guy's special. I didn't like it. And I'm going to, I know you saw me text you this yesterday, but after doing research, following the draft, the next day, reading, there was 2 or 3 things that made me feel better about it. And now I'm totally fine with it. Well, also after their second, third round pick, that the fact they got defensive ends, 2 that I like a lot, helps. But when I heard that the St. Louis or the LA Rams, who haven't had a first round pick in 7 years, they trade them. They don't put as much value as a lot of these teams do on them. The fact that they were trying to trade up to get Tet McMillan, and we all will agree that the Rams are one of the best drafting teams in the league. We saw what they did last year with the 2 defensive ends that ended up having 10 sacks and were huge for them. And mainly we see what they do at wide receiver with Puka or Cooper Kupp. I mean, they find wide receivers. And so the fact that Sean McVay and that team thought highly enough of this kid that they were going to trade up into the first round into a round that they rarely pick in recent years, that showed me something. And then the last thing,
where were they going to trade to? Were they going to trade all the way up to 8?
They were thinking,
or were they going to wait for him if he fell to trade up at 15, 16?
From the things I've read was that the majority of folks in the league thought that McMillan was going to Dallas at 12. That's where they thought he was going. So I would guess they were trying to get up ahead of Dallas, which would have been, 10 or 11, which the Bears were at 10. And so that's what I would guess. They didn't, they normally don't ever tell you who, but right. But they were trying to get up far, and Dallas was the team that most people thought but they would take them. So that made me feel better. And then the last thing was and I don't know how this was a secret for 2 months, but the fact that Bryce Young had been thrown with this kid for 2 months in California, both are California kids. But the fact that, normally you'll see, Tom Brady's thrown with this guy or so-and-so. The fact that no one
teammates.
Yeah, usually teammates. But, Bryce Young last year threw with DK Metcalf and guys like that.
They go to little clinics or something like that. They'll have
they live in the same area.
Little chats that they go to. Hey, listen, we're going to be throwing down over here.
Yep.
If you want to throw some catches, come on by. Jerry Rice used to do that a lot back in the day with a lot of different players.
Yep.
And the mountain that they would run just to train and get ready. So
same thing.
These things happen.
The fact that it was just a secret in this day of social media, the fact that nobody knew that, but Bryce had been throwing with him for 2 months, and I guess
maybe that's part of the club. It's like the Fight Club.
Oh, yeah, the QB receiver.
Yeah.
What happens here
stays here.
Well, maybe because it remained a secret. And evidently, Bryce was so impressed with this kid that when he was back in Charlotte, he literally went to Dan Morgan's office and said, "Look, man, I've been throwing with this guy, and we got to draft him." Now, again, obviously, there was no DBs, and I get all that, but those are the things that made me feel better. The fact that I keep saying St. Louis, the fact that the Rams wanted him. The fact that Bryce had been throwing with him and gave his stamp of approval and literally went into Dan Morgan's office to let him know that he wanted him. Those two things. And then after also, and I haven't seen this reported anywhere, but I was told from a good source that Walker could have a shoulder problem and could need shoulder surgery. Maybe not before the season, but soon. And so the Panthers knew that evidently, and so that may have weighed in on that or not. I don't know. Now, and I want your opinion. I want to let you go about Tet for a second, but the thing that gets you about Walker now is that the Falcons got him. So now he went from a Charlotte Panther fan growing up here to 4 hours down south, and we're gonna have to see this kid, twice a year. But let's get to your thoughts on McMillan, because I know that you and I disagree a little bit on that, but we both agreed at the time.
I don't think we disagree as much as you think. All right, and here's what I'll say with Tet. Obviously the guy is a great athlete. He's a volleyball player. He has incredible hops. He has big hands. He has great range. He is going to be likely a really good player in the NFL for a long time in the right system. My issue with the pick was not who we took at that position, as much as it was the need that we had for that position to make an impact immediately for this team, right? And with other players available like Jalen Walker or like Booker or what's the guy's name from the defensive end from Georgia as well. The other defensive
Mikael Williams.
Mikael Williams, thank you. Or like Mikael Williams, being there. Mikael Williams would have been a choice for me that I would have said, he is going to be a surefire thing and fit a need that the Panthers have.
Mm-hmm.
He is going to be a difference maker that we don't have on this team to complement everybody else and to potentially give you a long-term fix at that position. Tet McMillan coming in, I just don't know how he makes us better and gives us that dynamic that we don't have, which is number one, speed. And when I say speed, I'm not talking about straight line speed, get up and go. Usain Bolt's type of speed.
Right,
you run in a straight line and you're faster than everybody else. That's not the type of speed that works in the NFL. It helps, no doubt about it, because you have to have it. But what I'm talking about is the speed where you're able to drop your hips, make a move, get in an awkward position and explode out of that and be a difference maker and get separation. We don't have a guy on this roster that is a top-rated guy that can do that consistently from what we've seen. Now, we have hope that maybe a guy like Coker could do that, right? Or
Leggett,
the guy that they drafted from, Moore from Colorado.
Jimmy Horn.
Horn can do that, right? And they have some explosiveness that they're able to maybe get in and out of breaks, but there's the consistency that lacks, or they're not going to be special. They're not going to be, we hope that we find a Steve Smith with that Horn, pick. But when you pick an 8, that guy has to come in and be an immediate impact where he's going to be a difference maker when you play the Falcons. He's going to be a difference maker when you play the Saints. He's going to be a difference maker when you play the Bucks, right? I don't know. And I hope he proves us wrong that he can go out there and do everything that he was doing in college in the Pac-12, which is the equivalent. The Pac-12 is the equivalent of me playing 8-year-old flag football, right? Compared to the SEC, which is the NFL.
Right.
Right. And that's the difference for me. Right. It's the competition that he saw week to week. He's going to get open against teams that don't play defense. The Pac-12 doesn't play defense. Yep. I think you would agree with that.
100%.
Okay. My concern is that when he comes and he gets hands put on him by a grown man that is the best in the world at what he does, is he going to be able to get separation? There's nothing that is going to tell me by looking at him, by watching his film, that he is going to put fear in that DB where he has to play off of him, because he might go by you, he might go through you, he might make you miss and make you look stupid. That's the biggest fear that every DB has. DBs are going to look at him and say, okay, I'm going to lock him down. right? He might make a catch over the top of me, but I'm going to tackle him for a 15-yard gain. He's not going to blow by me because I run 4.3, he runs 4.5. I know he's tall, right? We don't have that type of offense that is going to, get guys open, throw guys open and get out the backside. He's not that type of receiver because he doesn't come in and out of his breaks the same way. That's the biggest concern with him, is his ability to create separation. He's straight line fast, he's tall, he's rangy. Leggett, to me, has a better opportunity to that, but he's high cut. When I say high cut, he runs tall, he runs high, he drops passes. We don't have this. Thielen is really the only guy on this roster, but he can't create separation. So what's going to happen, my fear is that we're not going to create any space on the defense. Everybody's going to plug the line of scrimmage and make you play in a box because nobody can get over the top of it.
Well, let me say this about that, because I don't completely disagree with you, but the Panthers, the last, I think it was 6 or 8 games last year when Bryce obviously played well, I think they were top 5 or 10 in the NFL in passes over 20 yards. And this is with last year's receiving crew. And so I think that they did get the ball downfield last year when Bryce came back on his second time. Now, Xavier Leggett runs 4.3. He's fast, like you said. He is a bigger receiver, but they didn't have the success getting him downfield last year. He did have some drops. Hopefully he corrects that into year 2. And I'm sure and the Panthers think he's worked his butt off this summer and will, or the spring and into the summer. But I think what they're thinking is, even with McMillan, who did, and if you watch his film in college, number one, they would line up a lot of different areas, right? So he was dangerous out of the slot. He was dangerous outside.
I know that's the only thing we have to compare with, right? Is what they did in college. But again, it's like if you went out and played against 8-year-old football.
Yeah, no, obviously it's a huge step up in competition.
But I'm trying to go from my experience and what I've seen great receivers look like. Larry Fitzgerald, even if you want to compare him to Evans, Mike Evans, a lot of people are trying to compare. Mike Evans is 240 pounds. Mike Evans will run through you. Mike Evans will run around you. Mike Evans has made a living at Texas A&M he made Johnny Manziel look good, right? That's the truth. He made Johnny Manziel look good. And that's hard to do. I know Johnny Manziel, but when he threw it up, Evans went. I don't know if McMillan is that dog, right? And playing in the Pac-12, and this is a cultural thing. You're going to get a couple of things with that Hawaiian culture. You're going to get that. I'm going to eat the bone of that chicken, and I'm going to clean that, and I'm going to take everything else. And I am a tribal alpha dude. Or, hey, bro, laid back life. I mean, it's Hawaiian. It's the Hawaiian life. It's the Hawaiian culture. I can say that because I've been there, and I have my roommates, and I played with many, many Polynesian players that are that way. It's either one or the other. This guy, I don't know if he has that I'm going to eat the bone of the chicken alpha in him. Well,
the people that are around him seem to think he does. I mean, and when you watch him being interviewed, or where you see him when he's talking, to me, he does seem like it, but you're right. Only time's going to tell. But I do think this, that when you're 6'5" and you can jump as high as he can jump, and he has big hands, he catches everything. One hand, two hand. If you are that, and even if you're not getting as much separation, if the corner's 6 foot that's guarding you, and Bryce throws the ball up high, they're not going to be able to defend it. And so I think that's one of the things the Panthers are looking at. I tell you what, their red zone offense could be, because Leggett last year was great in the red zone. I think all 4 of his touchdowns red zone. Well, they got 2 running backs that can run the ball in the red zone. They've got now 3 tight ends.
You stole a little bit of the thunder of what I said. I told you the things that I think that he's going to struggle with.
Yeah.
Right. Here's where I think he's going to help. And this is the reason why he's a top pick, because of what you're just saying. And if you'd like to finish, I don't want to steal what you're saying, but in the red zone, everything happens faster. You play inside the box. You need big physical players, tight ends, to make catches, to body guys and play basketball, where you're going to go post up a guy and make a tough catch, one way or the other, right? The fact that this guy can catch, you're going to throw it to the corner of the end zone and let a guy go treetop somebody, Randy Moss style, right? Yep. That's where the success is going to maybe be the productivity is going to be a little bit greater in the red zone, because now you have 2 really big targets. And on top of that, a good offensive line and a running game to boot.
No doubt.
Right. And that's where, the NFL with the analytics is really gone, right? When you look at and study the NFL from 20 to 20 or from 30 to 30, it's just, let's play off, let's play soft, let's keep everything in front of us, let's not give up big touchdowns. And then when we get into that 30-yard line, let's buckle down, right? That 20-yard line, let's buckle down. We're going to play tight. We're going to use the end zone as another defender. We're going to change the tempo of the which we play. And if you can't run the ball and be physical and get those hard yards because everybody's closer to the line, the throws are going to happen quicker, right? The type of offense that you see is going to happen faster. Or you have those receivers that can go body up guys, play basketball, tight ends, Travis Kelce. That's why he has so many touchdowns. Wesley Walls, Greg Olsen. That's why they had so many touchdowns, because they're big body targets to be able to do that. Panthers really don't have that tight end. So now looks like they're going to use their two receivers to replace that, right? Line them up in the slot. Now you have two big guys, line them up next to each other. Not only are they big, this guy better be able to block, if he's going to have any sustainability, especially in the red zone, because that's going to be the difference, is that can those guys block? Brown for the Eagles, he blocks for Saquon. If you're going to score touchdowns, you've got to have receivers that block. And that's the things that I'm worried about, is the physicality of a guy that's 212 pounds that played in the Pac-12, where he's not putting his nose in there to knock guys around and to get underneath somebody's face mask and drive them off the ball.
Well, hopefully when they, Dan and Canales, they spent time with him. He was one of their top 30 visits, and they interviewed him another time and seemed to think that he is. So we hope they're right. And again, you look at all these draft analysts and the ones that didn't give the Panthers an A, that maybe gave them a B, was for that reason. They just thought they should have went defense. But I think,
let me just give it real quick. Let me just, so the people listening, so I can give maybe a better comparison of what we have in our wide receiver room. I think we have a bunch of Corvettes and Mustangs, right? We don't have a Ferrari. And that's the one thing I was hoping, and I don't even know if he was there in this draft, right? But I was hoping that we could come away with, at that 8 position, if you're going to take wide receiver, go get a Ferrari. All right, we have plenty of Mustangs and Corvettes that are big muscle cars, but there's nothing that's going to be like, wow, that thing is incredible, and it just goes.
I think that they're hoping that Leggett turns into that, because he does have the speed, he's got the size, he's got to catch the ball.
Consistent. That's a big part.
It's a huge part, and he's got to stay healthy. So I think they hope that could be, and I think that they do believe that McMillan is just going to be a nightmare matchup and cause a lot of issues. And then their 6th-round pick, Jimmy Horn Jr. out of Colorado, he is the guy that is, ironically, they comp to Steve Smith. He's quick, he's fast, he's only 5'8". Steve's taller than that, but
Steve also. You've seen the way Steve is built.
Yeah, Steve's built like a running back. Oh yeah,
you've shaken Steve's hand. You've tied up in a wrestling knot with Steve Smith.
Yeah, he is strong.
Is a strong individual.
He is.
That is a. You can take the boy out of the hood. You can't take the hood out of the boy, and he's going to have a lot of hood when he plays football.
Yeah,
right. So that's kind of the mentality that he's had. Now, if this Horn turns out to be if he has that strength, that man strength, he shakes your hands, his calves looks like bowling balls back there, and he'd go up there to treetop it and break tackles, then we'll be talking about him like Steve Smith. But until he shows that he's like Steve Smith,
Well, yeah, and look, he's not as thick as Steve right now anyway, but he is quick and fast, and I think the Panthers brought him in. But the one thing the Panthers have done, they also signed Hunter Renfrow as a free agent, the Pro Bowl receiver from the Raiders, who sat out last year.
We have him already.
Well, that was my point, and we'll get back to some of these draft picks, and we'll cover them more in depth later with Ricky Raines, but. That's what I was going to say, is that the Panthers, by bringing in Renfrow, by some of these undrafted free agents they brought in from Miami and UCF, and then drafting McMillan, their wide receiver room now is deep, and there's competition, which it has lacked that. I mean, look at last year, Coker, an undrafted free agent, outplayed.
Looks like he's the best player on the field.
Right. So
as an undrafted free agent.
Exactly. So now they've got at least depth and competition in a room. Now, them signing Hunter Renfrow, and I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but I have read some things that said, does that mean now the Panthers trade Adam Thielen? And I don't think so, but they may.
Adam Thielen is the Ricky Prohl of that locker room.
He'd be taking Bryce's favorite weapon away.
He's the glue that holds that room together. He's the trust factor for what you just said. And it sounds like he has a lot of say right now. So when you're an organization,
and he had a good year last year, minus the injuries.
Well, no, he didn't have a good year.
I mean, minus the injuries, he did.
Who?
Thielen when he played.
Thielen. Okay, I thought you were talking about Bryce Young.
No, Thielen.
Yeah, Bryce Young had a good second half of the season.
Right. Yeah.
Bryce Young did not have a good season.
No, correct.
Right. So, when you're talking about as a coaching staff giving some autonomy and some control to a quarterback to go out and get his players like Tech McMillan.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. Then you're not going to take away his favorite weapon unless you're going to put him on the coaching staff.
Right.
That's the only way you're going to do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I wouldn't think they would either, but a lot of people were just thinking that maybe Renfrow coming in because he does play. But look, we don't know what kind of deal that was yet. Renfrow,
I think it was a 1 year deal.
Yeah. And it could be.
I was reading it was a 1 year deal.
All right, so he gets a little bit of money.
Yeah.
If they cut him out of camp, probably they don't lose much.
It doesn't hurt a little signing bonus. Nothing's going to hurt him.
Yeah.
And then, he gets to go in there and compete.
Because these other guys that he's going to be competing with, a lot of them are rookies. And so even if they do show promise in camp, doesn't mean that they're going to put him on the 53-man roster. And Renfro's been there. And again, if he still has juice in the tank.
It gives you some experience.
No doubt. So that'll be interesting.
It gives you some experience in an inexperienced room. And I think that's the reason and the purpose. Now you have two guys, Thielen. Renfrow doesn't really know the staff or anything. He's not really familiar with the dynamics of, the characters and the people that he's going to be playing with yet. So he's still in there just kind of sitting back, I'm assuming, and just observing, where Thielen's more of the guy that's directing.
He's the
traffic.
coach on the field.
He's directing traffic.
Yeah,
right.
and Renfro's a Myrtle Beach kid, played at Clemson, and his favorite team is the Panthers. So last year, they did say he did say that he watched a lot of Panther games and all that stuff. So it'll be interesting. They definitely got depth in that room. Speaking of depth, second and third round, the Panthers went defensive end, and I looked at a lot of the mock drafts I did, and Nick Scorton, who we took in the second round out of Texas A&M, was not available on any of my mock drafts in the second round. Every mock draft that I saw had him going either late first, early second, and the Panthers drafted 57. They ended up trading up a little to get him, but I was very surprised that he was there. Scorton's an interesting guy, big dude, had 10 sacks 2 years ago at Purdue, hit the portal like so many do now. Got to A&M. Texas A&M brings in Duke's ex-coach, comes in, wants him to get bigger. So he puts on 25 pounds. And instead of, he had 10 sacks at Purdue the year before. Last year at A&M, he only had 5 sacks, but he was asked to do things a little differently under this defense. So Mel Kiper had him last year and before the season ranked as a top 20 player. But because he went from 10 sacks to 5 sacks, a lot of people lowered him down.
He got a lot more attention.
True. And so he loses the weight, but before the combine, he's back in the shape that he feels he's best at. I think the Panthers probably still will have maybe put a little bit on, but still, minus if he doesn't lose those 5 sacks of production, he was a top 20 guy last year.
I can tell you this as an ex-player, right? Playing different positions was going to help me dictate what type of weight I needed to carry in order not to be pushed around and be able to be the one pushing guys around. At center, I didn't have to be 300 pounds.
Right.
At center, I could be 285, a lot quicker. I could, I felt more comfortable at 200. I felt more athletic. I felt stronger. I felt faster. I felt, more aggressive at 285 versus 305 or 308, being a big kind of hammerhead out there, just kind of lugging around. But I had to carry that weight when I played guard. For a guy that's playing this 3-4 end outside backer, there's the same type of thing applies. When you're playing an outside backer, you can be a Jadeveon Clowney, 240, 250, 235, and still have impact. If you're 285, it's going to be tough to open your hips and get in space. You're going to get tired quicker. You're not going to be able to be as mobile or as agile. It's going to take you a lot more pressure to stop, plant, drive, where you feel like you're going to break a leg or something if you're too heavy, versus when you're light, you can plant and go. You just stick it in the ground and go. And I think that's where this Nick Scorton kid has really kind of, I don't know if his coaches were letting him know or feeding into, you have to be 285. You have to do this in order to be an NFL player. And then you still have to be quick and do those things. Well, everybody's body's not built like that. Right. So if you're a naturally thick, heavy set guy, barrel chested, whatever it might be, big shoulders, broad chest, you might be able to carry a couple more pounds. But if you're already trying to put that weight on, and you're naturally walking around at 220, 230, and you're putting 20 pounds on at 240, that's already a lot. That's muscle. That's a lot of pressure, things of that nature. When you're putting 60 pounds on it's almost insurmountable where you're slowing yourself down and hurting yourself. For Scorton, I think that's going to be one of his biggest advantages is that he's dropped that 20 pounds. He's got back down to about 265, 260 range. He's still going to be able to put his hand in the dirt and be explosive up the field. He's still going to have enough impetus at the point of attack to be able to push the pocket. And also, too, if people aren't real familiar with how you play 3-4, size and ability absolutely matter, because even though you just have 3 down guys, those down guys, that fourth guy that comes down, there's a lot more dynamic things you can do playing a 3-4 than when you play a traditional 4-3, right? And that one of them is that a guy that can put his hand down can also drop. There's a lot more zone blitzes, a lot of different types of rushes. It just gives a defensive coordinator a lot more flexibility to be able to do things with undersized guys and become creative versus in a 4-3, I better have a defensive end that's the weak side defensive end that looks like TJ Watt that can get up the field and get by guys, or a JJ Watt, that can do that. In the 3-4, you're going to have a big nose guard. He's going to hold the point of attack. You got to have good plug linebackers, and you have outside backers that can either rush or drop. And I think that's what they got with this kid. He's going to be a dynamic player. I love the pick from Scorton. I think that's where, to me, the Panthers started winning in this draft from the second round on. And I'm not saying McMillan's not a great pick. Yeah. But when you start looking at the draft grades that people are giving them, I think it's deserving because they filled a need with this guy. This guy very easily could have been a top pick in the first round.
I mean, a lot of people say this guy could very easily be better than Jalen Walker or the guys there. So he also is good against the run, which a lot of people don't talk about that as much. But I even saw Mel Kiper when I was reading his grades today when he talked about Scorton, just saying that he's an undervalued guy against the run as well.
He has a high motor.
Absolutely
he went to A&M.
Plus, did you see? I love this kind of stuff. But when he was getting drafted, he had his whole family's there, and he had a table and had every NFL hat on. So whoever you get picked from, you put the hat on. They got the TV, the camera crew there. And when the Panthers picked him, he was so happy and whatever. He put his hat on, family's all around, and he tells them to move, and he swats all the other hats like out on the floor, like they all passed up on me, so he's got a little chip on his shoulder, which we like too.
Well, and he went to A&M, and A&M has built an identity over the years of playing great defense, the 12th man, so he has pedigree to come from. Yeah. So it's not going to be like you're retraining a guy to come out here from the Pac-12 and you're going to have to be physical now because this is the SEC.
Yeah, he played at Purdue too, which is always playing Ohio State and tough teams too. The funny thing in the fifth round, I'm jumping around the draft a little bit here, but in the fifth round we took Mitchell Evans, the tight end out of Notre Dame, who I love. He played hurt a lot last year and still had a really good year, but 6'6" guy. But he said that when Notre Dame played Texas A&M last year, he goes, man, Scorton was a nightmare for us to game plan against. He goes, I feel bad for the other teams because literally we spent so much time and Notre Dame's coach Marcus Freeman obviously is a defensive guy, and Mitchell Evans was like, man, it was so hard for us to game plan against that kid.
Let me give you a comparison when I see him on film, and this is going to be shooting for the stars. If we get this guy, we are going to be counting our blessings, but very similar to the way that Bruce Smith played. Long, uses his arms very well, plays with great leverage. Bruce Smith wasn't the biggest guy in the world, but my God, he was the most. I felt like you were hitting nothing. Every time you try to hit with those your punches or whatever it is, it's like you're missing because he was so slippery, right? He's a slippery defensive end that has the impetus and the impact to be able to press the run like Bruce Smith did. So you never know what you're going to get. You might get speed, you might get power. And that's what keeps those deep offensive tackles guessing, is that when he comes from speed to power, it surprises the tackles and it puts those big guys on their heels where he collapses that pocket or he gets around the edge. Yeah,
and the other comp they had for him, and again, if he turns out to be close to this, everybody be happy. And I'm not going to remember his name. The defensive end for Baltimore Ravens for all those years, that was just great.
I know you're talking about Suggs.
A lot of people compare him to Suggs. So
from Arizona State.
Yeah, exactly. So if he gets close to either one of those, then the Panthers are going to be very happy with that pick. The third pick, we go defensive end again, Princely Umanmielen, which I don't even know if I'm saying that. We got a lot of different names in this thing now, man. I'm an English major, and I can't pronounce half of it.
Go to our linguistics class.
Man, you ain't lying. We get some AI in here. But Princely is from Ole Miss.
We'll come up with some nicknames.
Princely. That's his name. We'll just call him Princely. Yeah. And Princely, was top 4 ranked when it comes to pure pass rush. He's got all the moves. He's got, they say that the dude, is very bendy, strong. Another dog again. I mean, after he was drafted, he was quoted as saying, basically, he didn't say it in these words, but basically Panthers got him cheap, and all these other teams in about 3-4 years are going to have to be paying his butt because he's going to come here and earn it. So they got another dog. Priestley was in a lot of mock drafts to the Panthers. The Panthers had visited with him. They liked him. They liked his tape. And so, those back-to-back defensive end picks, which a lot of people, and you never know, right, until they play the game, but a lot of people did have these guys rated pretty highly. It made me feel a lot better about taking McMillan at 1, because now I'm going, all right, we were lucky enough to get 2 of these guys who are very highly rated defensive ends. They happen to be there. We traded up a little to get Scorton. And so now I went, okay, so now we got the best receiver. Okay, you could argue maybe the second best receiver, depending on who you are. And we got 2 defensive ends who have a chance to be really good, and hopefully will play this year. And again, give us depth. We've got 2 defensive ends now, because there's rumors now that Clowney might get cut to save a little bit of money. But now our defensive end room has got competition. We've got 5, DJ Johnson, who, we drafted a few years ago and really hasn't panned out, but he showed some flashes last year. Will still be there if they keep Clowney. You got DJ Wanham, who missed the first 7 or 8 games last year and played great when he came back, 6 or 7 sacks. And then, we'll see what they do with Clowney. We also signed, a couple of defensive ends already before the season. So, I think adding those 2 guys made me feel a lot better about Tet. And both these guys have high ceilings. And if you're a Panther fan, you've got to be really excited that what they came away with in the first 3 rounds.
No doubt about it. And I think, it's funny, the comparison I think a lot of people are going to make with, this player is Jadeveon Clowney. Yeah. Maybe not as explosive, didn't have the huge highlight play that he had in college, but, the long dreads, the length, the long arms, the way he plays and gets up the field, the way he dips his shoulder to get on the inside when he has a stunt or something like that. He can get up the field, he can pressure, and he can also get down the sideline. So I'm chased down a quarterback a quarterback in the draft. And that's the one thing that I felt like the Panthers were really missing was, speed on the offensive side, at that receiver position. And again, it's that take off the top speed that I still don't feel like we have, because I know we think that 4.4 for a certain size is fast, but DBs don't.
Right.
And DBs that run 4.3, they'll still, you're not going to get a guy out of his back pedal, right? And the same thing applies on the defensive side. The one thing that I felt like we really lacked last year, when you look at the Eagles, when you look at the top defenses, the Ravens, the Texans, whoever you're going to look at and say, damn, those guys get after the ball. They have guys that can run, and they have a lot of them, right? So they're never going to get tired. The Eagles, one of the biggest reasons why they had success and they were the number 1 ranked defense was because they had guys rotating in that were just as explosive and fast and could start for any other team in the league. And we've seen that. We've seen other guys, their backups, going to other places, or their starters leaving and their backups replacing. Anytime you have that type of depth, you're going to have a special unit, right? And doesn't mean you're going to win championships necessarily, but your unit might be the strength of the defense. Right now, from what the Panthers were able to do, you don't know how these rookies are going to mature. You don't know if they're going to be able to develop, who's their coach that's going to teach them the multiple pass rush moves. It's not just going to be, hey, let me rip up the field and get by an offensive tackle like you did in college.
Yep.
You're going to have to develop, just like a pitcher, multiple pitches, multiple moves. And a lot of times you're setting guys up, but that's what it's going to be. And you're going to have at least multiple guys to be able to do that. I love what the Panthers did in the offseason. I love what they did in the draft with the defensive line. I feel like we have an opportunity to be better because of that. And when I say better, I don't mean just better in general, because everybody's going to feel like you get better when you go draft. But I think make a difference and make up some gap between the Falcons, the Bucks, and the Saints, so that we're competing. I feel like if we did anything, if we really made a move to be able to be better, it's on the defensive, the front 7.
No doubt.
The front 4.
I mean, what Dan did with free agency on offense, he did with defense this year. I mean, we got beef now on that defensive line, and lots of it, and we've got now speed at defensive end and power. You got Derek Brown coming back, and then in the 5th round, with our first of 2 picks in the 5th round, we took Cam Jackson out of Florida. 6'6", 315 or 330 pound defensive nose plugger. And so they've got a lot of doggone beef up there on that line now. And it's going to be night and day compared to what we had last year. And it needed to be, because last year was the worst in the history of the NFL. I know we keep saying it, but that's the case.
But it's been addressed.
Right? Exactly.
And whether it comes to fruition where these guys are going to be the next, Sam Adams or Saragusa in the middle, or a Jadeveon Clowney or a Bruce Smith on the outside is to be determined. But the fact of the matter is Dan saw a weakness, he addressed it, and he attacked it. Not just on the defensive side, but last year he did it on the offensive line. So I feel really comfortable, going into a season now, because as a coach, I know this as far as my players go. Offense, you can have 10 guys kick somebody's ass, one guy make a mistake, and it'd be a negative play.
Yep.
On defense, you can have 10 guys getting their ass kicked, one guy make a great play and looks like the defense is dominant, right? You have a lot of guys over there on that defensive side that if 10 guys get fallen down, one guy can step up and make a play. It's a lot easier for defensive guys, and as offensive players, we tease them a little bit. They're not very smart. All they have to do is find ball, see ball, but they can't think. And you have to be able to process on the offensive side. You have to be able to pick up, blitzes. You have to be able to see stunts, all the things that you look for as a cerebral guy on the offensive side. You don't necessarily have to be that on the defensive side.
Right.
You can walk and chew gum and do it better than everybody else.
You just react
and be an incredible athlete. They're much better athletes than we are, but they're not the smartest guys in the world.
Well, I tell you what, it's going to be exciting just to see them in camp with all the depth they have now in the competition. They still have safety, and we'll get into this, but they still need to address the safety position. They did draft a safety, Lathan Ransom, out of Ohio State. They drafted him in the 4th round. If you like guys who love to hit and are tough and great run stoppers, and he's your guy, the tape on him was pretty fun to watch. And I saw a stat last night, and I forget what they call the actual stat, but it's a cumulative thing that they do for each position, and they've been doing it, I think, for 12 years. It's some
Pro Football Focus.
No, it's not Pro Football Focus, but it's somebody like that. Yeah. And they showed the safeties and that number of rating for the last 10 years. And Ransom showed up at number 8.
Probably tackles that they make, missed tackles, tackles in space. They accumulate all these numbers and stats. They put it into a formula, and it comes out and spits out this number.
Yeah, and he came out number 8, and that's in the last 10 years. So again, who knows? He's not the fastest guy. I think he rounds like
4.5 or 4.6.
Yeah, 4.57. So he's not the fastest guy. So it sounds like they would be using him a lot more as on running downs than passing downs. But we'll see. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have Ricky Raines join us again from Panthers on Tap podcast, as well as Carolina Draft Guide. He's going to go through these players for us real quick, give us a little more details on some of them that maybe we don't know as much about, or you guys don't know as much about. But he does a great job, and I'm sure he's excited to talk about this draft, because I know that he loved the way it turned out, and he'll join us right after this.
It's time to suit up. Here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome back to Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout, along with 10-year vet Frank Garcia. And right now we're bringing on Ricky Raines from Panthers on Tap, Carolina Draft Guide. Ricky was with us last Friday, did a great job of breaking down who to look for in the Panthers draft. And actually some of those names we saw come to the Panthers, some we saw go to the Falcons, some we saw right around that area. But how you doing, Ricky?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me back on. And, I was wondering, when I was watching the 2nd and 3rd rounds unfold and they drafted Nick Scorton, I was like, man, I hope that I told them how much I enjoyed Nick Scorton as a prospect, and that was one of the guys I liked.
You did. Well, let's start with him, because obviously McMillan went first, but let's start with him because I know the 2 defensive ends that we took in the 2nd, 3rd round made me feel a lot better about taking McMillan number 1 instead of a defensive player. So, yeah, give us a little of your scouting report on Nick.
Man, I love Scorton. I think that if he hadn't have transferred over to A&M and gotten involved, and I think that's what we talked about a bit about with the responsibilities they ask of their defensive front players at A&M, it's very reminiscent to Georgia, right? Where it's tough sometimes to show like a translatable trajectory of how a guy who's playing 4-eye at 6'4", 285 pounds, how he fits as a rush backer, right? In an odd front in the NFL. But Nick was playing about 25 pounds heavier than he did at Purdue. And I don't think that was his natural weight. You see him at his pro day that he put on his showcase. He's slim, man. He is compact and muscular. He's dense. He's got good length, 33-inch arms. I mean, this is your prototypical rush backer for an outside, for an outside linebacker for an odd front. Yeah. I just think that the sky's the limit. The guy can't even buy beer yet. Let him turn 21 years old. Let his body continue to, naturally mature. I think that the sky is the absolute limit for this kid. They talk about his work ethic and ability to be coached and want to soak up information like a sponge. Those are all those little code words for, the thing that NFL teams look for. And then you add in the talent, man. It's just, I'm excited.
Well, Ricky, when you look at score, and I agree with you. The same thing. I made the argument for myself personally. The difference between when I played center or when I played guard, and the amount of weight I had to carry at guard versus center. I was a lot quicker, faster, more athletic at center. With a 285-pound body versus a 310-pound body at guard, where I felt lethargic and I felt more powerful, but I couldn't move as quick. I couldn't last as long, and those type of things. So for him, I think that's obviously going to be a great thing. And for the Panthers and what they're trying to do schematically, I also feel like that's going to be a great move. The one thing I really love is that there's now speed on the defensive side, which they really lacked last year.
100%. And you make a great point about what those responsibilities, right? Like as a guard and a center, you have different responsibilities. You're moving a whole lot more as a center. You need to be quicker. Well, if you're talking about an outside linebacker in a 3-4, he's going to be a lot quicker. He's going to rush. But he does have to have that heft and that stability to set the edge. That is where Scourton fits really nicely with what Evero likes and what Evero prefers, just from his scheme standpoint. He can do that. But then you add his speed element. He's a power rusher. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have any twitch and that he doesn't have any get up. He's got it. It's just a complementary part. He's got a lot of counters. He's got an inside spin move that is lethal. He showed it off more at Purdue than he did at A&M. But then you add that Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss. That's the tall, bendy, long speed rusher on the other side that can maybe even start as a DPR. He doesn't have to see the field 3 downs. I mean, that was just a really smart approach, I thought, from how they intended on building up this defensive front through free agency and the draft.
Let's talk about Tet McMillan real quick, because, I look at guys and – I try to equate them from what they're going to do to college to what they're going to do in pro football. And, playing the Pac-12, the physicality is not going to necessarily be there as you see in the SEC. When you come to the National Football League, you're playing against the best of the best at their positions. And a guy that runs 4.5, a 4.5 40 is not going to scare them or push them back on their heels necessarily until they start making plays and taking the top off. But for a guy that's going to make for a speed guy in the NFL, it's not necessarily the guys that run straight ahead, the Usain Bolt speed. It's the guys that get in and out of their breaks, from awkward positions and can explode and get open. I don't feel like the Panthers really have that. And that's the only concern I have with Tet McMillan, because I do feel like the positives are going to outweigh the negatives. I just feel like we didn't really address that position or that need that the Panthers have in this draft.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing for me and where I like what Tetero and McMillan can bring for this Panthers offense and to the receiver room in general, I think he allows Xavier Legette to open things up in a much more organic fit for him, right? He can still play X, and I think they're going to play him a lot at the X, but I think you've got some interchangeability now with Tetero and McMillan being able to slide over and play the X a lot as well. Canales loves to incorporate pre-snap motions, right? He likes to get his guys clean looks, clean releases. That's going to help Xavier Legette. And Xavier Legette, where his speed shows up, is with a ramp up, right? He doesn't have that instant twitch like you were just talking about, that sudden start-stop ability. And neither does Tet or T-Mac. Let me not say Tet. We went through this last
T-Mac,
episode too. I'm still working through it, man. I'm trying.
I'm just calling McMillan.
McMillan, yeah. I should have took your advice there. But where McMillan does really well, I think, and Frank, you just kind of spoke on it, is it's not always just straight line speed, right? That doesn't have to be the only threat as a vertical threat. I think that his tempoing ability in his route stems and at the beginning of his routes, I really do think that enables more separation than what we saw at the college level because of what they asked him to do at Arizona. Arizona, a lot of times it was man, he's down there somewhere, right? I'm going to chuck it up and I'm going to throw it. And he had to recover for a lot of holding onto the ball that his quarterback did. I think with an anticipatory thrower like Bryce Young, you give Tetero McMillan the ability to run the full route tree from different alignments, and you get Xavier Legette running these horizontal planes, these meshers concepts, right? I really think that you're in for a much different offense than what we saw. And they did add Jimmy Horn Jr. out of Colorado late in that draft. And that's the guy. That's the guy with the giddy up. That's the guy with the juice, right? You can put him into some gadget packages. You can get him on some reverses, scheme him up some open looks, man, get him in space, and it's lights out, home run hit every single time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are excited about him and all the different draft analysts that I read and grading. I didn't see one that didn't like that kid, and especially in the 6th round where you're taking a flyer on a player. Anyway, let's get back to Princely real quick. This is another last name that's going to get me. Uman Mielen.
Uman Mielen.
Uman Mielen. All right, Uman Mielen. Princely. I watched him during the year. You live in the South. You watch the SEC all the time, and I always liked him. And he did look to me like a guy that was just made for rushing the passer. Yeah. He was quick. He's not a one-trick pony. And I heard some offensive linemen that played against him talk about you never knew what he was doing. He would trick you this play, and anyway, things you would hope that somebody that played against him would say. Give us a little more info on him. And I know I think he had 10.5 sacks last year. Yeah. I know he was rated the 4th best, I think, pass rusher in the draft. Give us some more scoop on him.
Yeah, he's got the really good metrics, the analytics that you look for, right? With the pass rush win rate, the true pass rush sets, the ability to win on those where you know that he's rushing the passer. What I like the most about Princely. His bend, first of all, is probably top 3, top 4 in this entire class, and that's as a relatively high cut guy at 6'4". He's a legitimate 6'4". You've got some of these smaller, shiftier guys like a Colin Oliver, who out of Oklahoma State, he's 6'1.5". And yeah, he can get underneath and he can really bend and corner well. But Princely has over 34.5-inch arms as well. So when he gets in vicinity, when he's in striking range, man, he's got the length and he's got good big hands that are strong, that when he gets a grip on you, he can make a play. I think that what you'll see from him at the NFL and the next level is they are going to work on getting him at a better set as an edge setter. Because of that long frame and that stout, and he doesn't have this frail build by any means. He's 250 pounds. Yeah. But all that length distributes the weight in the muscles a little bit differently. So I think that when you get him on a NFL nutrition regimen, right, when he's working out constantly, he's not going to school, right? Like these kids were going to school and they weren't allowed to do a whole lot of things. Get him into the NFL where this is life. Yeah. Well, first of all, it looked like he loves football. You hear him talk. He's like, I'm going to make y'all break the bank in 3 or 4 years. Yeah, this dude wants to be great, man. And if you have that attitude and that mindset coming in, I think that you can really work with that.
Ricky, there's nothing worse for me than a guy that could scratch the back of my head in his stance. You get a guy with 34.5-inch arms, that's if he can use them. Right. That's going to be a big advantage. And I think that's the biggest challenge for a lot of these college players is the hand fighting that takes place in the NFL 100%. Is a lot different than what has maybe happened in college, where you can just use pure athleticism to get by, some of these average tackles, where in the NFL, again, you're talking about the Orlando Paces, the Jonathan Ogdens, the guys that are going to be, the lanes, the guys are going to be technicians. You're going to have to be able to out-technician them.
And you see it with guys like Texas A&M, Shamar Stewart, right? Really big athletic guy. But the way that he won so much in college was just utilizing that athleticism. He was bigger and faster than the guy in front of him. And so he was able to overpower and dominate. Princely had a tiny bit of that. But really, man, it's his get off of the line, right? He has this first step that is lethal. And that first step is going to make that offensive lineman have to change his plan almost immediately. If he's hip to hip by the time that snap is off and he's making him say, okay, look, I can't even get all the way back in my set because this guy is in front of me, he starts lunging. Princely, if he can develop all those counter moves, spin moves, right? The speed to power ability, if he can start to kind of hone in on the nuance of that position, which Frank, I think is a great point that you bring up there. They've got to have really active hands. You have to have accurate hands as well. You just can't miss because these NFL players are a different caliber of athlete that if you miss, they're going to punish you for it.
Let's go to the 4th round where this is the one pick I think if I had to be critical of a pick in the entire draft for the Panthers, this would be the one when we took Trevor Etienne, the running back out of Georgia. I understand why they took him because he's definitely a different style of back than what they already have, and they can do some different things with him. Obviously I watched him when he was at Florida, watched him at Georgia. definitely a good running back. There were just other guys on the board that I like better if they were going to take a running back there. However, the guys that I like better all were more similar to what we already had. So I totally understood it. What do you think about the Etienne pick?
I really like Trevor Etienne. And I think that, we had Brooks Austin, who covers the Georgia Bulldogs, on Draft Crush this period. And he kind of told us about Trevor a little bit as well. And he said, look, untapped potential as a receiver. I think that he's got these shorter arms, so he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that you would expect to be a good receiver out of the backfield, but he's got juice and he's got natural soft hands. That's a skill set that I think Carolina desperately needed on this team, was somebody to offer almost like that Joker matchup out of the backfield who can expose linebackers at that second level. But I think besides that too, the special teams contributions, I think, is a really big allure for Trevor Etienne. He's going to come in immediately and put a ton of pressure on Raheem Blackshear to step his game up. And that's what I saw as well, to kind of get a tiny bit off track here, but also stay here. I saw this intent reasoning of saying, I want to make every single position uncomfortable and bring in competition instead of handing jobs and handing roles over to players just because they're already on this roster. Dave Canales and Dan Morgan put the entire roster on notice here and said, you guys are going to come in and earn these jobs this year. Yeah, and we're going to field the best 53-man roster that we can based on the fact that we have talent now. Yeah, it's not just a need or, being comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, Frank and I talked about this earlier. They've created depth, and we'll dive into this. I know Frank has a question, but, in the receiving room, the defensive line, I mean, we've created depth. So you're right. They accomplished that for sure.
Well, let me ask you, the thing that stands out with me, obviously, is the 5'9", 205. Ricky, when you look at a guy, again, coming into the NFL, in college, you can just outrun guys. You can mismatch. If you can't block, you can release, and you have to have a quarterback that's in sync with that. But in the NFL, you have to be able to block if you're going to be a third down back. Is this guy capable of blocking linebackers or blitzing safeties at this level?
The encouraging part is that he appears to be very willing to put his body in that position for collision, right? That's the encouraging part. The second part, though, is that he's got to get squared up. He could be a little bit late on it, and I think that's, again, man, you put him in those positions a bit more in practice and develop that. I think that becomes a little bit more natural for him. There is a fair concern, though, is he stout enough to handle that, or is he going to get run through? I saw multiple occasions on film of him standing up blockers and withstanding that collision. So I think that there is absolutely the ability. But can they get that to be a consistent part is going to be, can he take over the third down role consistently? The other part of this, too, though, is that if Jonathan Brooks comes back healthy, right, after another ACL recovery, if he comes back healthy, he was one of the best pass blockers in the NFL draft in his year. So he comes back, that's your third down back. That's the guy that you want to use for that role. So Etienne, again, I think is on that multiple timeline ideal where they can look at it and say, he fits with Brooks, he fits with Chuba, he fits with Rico Dowdle. This is a guy that we don't have to have just a 1 year, 2 year outlook. This is a guy that we can incorporate into different phases of the game for years.
Gotcha. I would agree with that. Fourth round, the Panthers went with the safety, Lathan Ransom out of Ohio State. And I think I hit you up right then because I did not know a whole lot about him. Since then, obviously, after talking to you and then reading everything that I possibly could about the guy, sounds like this dude loves football, loves to hit, is mean, has bad intentions, and will be great against the run for sure.
I think a lot of fans were a little bit confused or perplexed with this one because they wanted more of the center fielder free safety style of player. But what this tells me is that Dan Morgan really did stay true to his board and what the scouts did on their jobs, right? Doing their evals. He came away with saying, we don't love any of the free safeties that were still on the board. Maybe they did really like Jonas Sanker, who we know that they met. We know that they had met with the 30 visit. I think that they probably did like him and that they wish that he had lasted into their pick. Andrew Makuba is another guy that really fit that billing. But what they looked at is when those guys were gone, do they reach and take the next best available person at that particular role, in that particular position? Or do they follow their board of best player available and say, if we get a guy that can offer us a much better depth piece than trying to force a starter in, then that's probably what a smart NFL team would do, right?
Yep.
And Lathan Ransom can also offer a tremendous special teams ability, I think, immediately. With his find target and destroy it mentality, his downhill acceleration and explosiveness, That's the kind of guy I want on my gunner, right? And you just lost Sam Franklin. This might be the replacement for Sam Franklin on special teams.
Yeah, and the Panthers have a little salary cap money available, and it sounds like they're probably going to be making some more moves to free up even more. But they've had a couple free safeties in here, and I don't think anyone would be shocked within the next week, probably at most, they'll probably add a free safety through free agency.
Julian Blackmon would definitely be the name that I would keep an eye on. I think that's the guy that they've spoken with a couple of different times. The sentiment that I get when talking to people around the team is that that's still somebody that they have interest in. And Blackmon did a smart thing and waited out the draft to find out where those holes were going to be on NFL rosters. And his value might have even increased a tiny bit.
They say there's a few. Yeah, they say there's a few teams, including the Panthers, that are trying to get him. So he's just going to probably take the best deal he can find.
Ricky, real quick, I know you're on a limited time here, but just talk about anytime I hear a tight end from Notre Dame, I think that's a good thing, right? Whether it's blocking or pass catching, going to be a dynamic player. He's going to be a good football player. Yep. I had a kid that from Catholic that I coached last year that ended up going there, and I said, hey, listen, you don't fit the build or the stereotype of a prototypical tight end that goes to Notre Dame that's 6'6", 265 pounds, that's going to catch passes over the middle and is going to be able to block his ass off. The only difference between him and a guy like Lane Johnson is a couple of cheeseburgers. So, Mitchell Evans is a pretty good blocker. We've seen that on film. Is he going to be able to make this roster and have some impact?
I think so. And I'll tell you the truth, Frank. This was my tight end 9. I was pretty high on him. I think that if he had not been coming off of the ACL injury that he suffered the year prior, he had a very slow start to 2024 because he was still getting healthy, still trusting where he was with his recovery. But if he had not had that injury, there was talk about him being a 2nd or 3rd round prospect. And you saw at the tail end of the season, especially in the college football playoffs, this dude is a baller, man. Like he is. He's got good hands. He's got a natural feel for the field. His spatial awareness is really smooth. Like I want a tight end that almost has that like extension of the quarterback feel as far as his mentality, right? He needs to be able to find soft spots in zone. He needs to be able to bring a safety or a linebacker with him. If you're going to run him out deep, you need to open up underneath. He needs to have good hands, but you're right about the blocking. He lined up so much in the slot that people think he's not a very good blocker. Watch his inline reps. He's probably one of the top 3 or 4 inline blockers that can act as an extension tethered to that offensive line. In the run game, talk about running 12 personnel now. Deion Sanders, you're going to really alleviate some responsibility woes on him as far as blocking because that's not his wheelhouse. And you let him start to be that seam monster that he's supposed to be and let Mitchell Evans be the guy that keeps the offensive looks very multiple out of the same formations to run multiple concepts. I think it's a really smart pick. And he also just screams Dave Canales. Look at the guys that Canales had coached before and drafted, been around for drafting tight ends. Cade Otton, very similar football player to what Mitchell Evans brings.
Yeah, I would agree. We talked Jimmy Horn Jr. some, and everyone's excited about him. Let's go to the last guy that we haven't talked about, and that's Cam Jackson, who they took out in the 5th round. Defensive tackle, big dude, big guy, not small at all. What's your thoughts on Cam?
I love it, man. And look, I hate this so much. My buddy and I, who put together the Carolina Draft Guide, we text each other because this was the first pick that was not in the guide. And the reason for that is I wasn't going to put any prospect that I didn't get a full evaluation done into there. I didn't want to seem disingenuous with what we were doing. I watched 1 or 2 games with the intent purpose of watching Cam Jackson. But I watched a lot of other Florida players, and Cam Jackson, man, he stands out. When he's on the field, he's one of those guys that the minute you see him get off the bus, right, you're like, all right, we're going to have to game plan for that guy.
Yeah.
Like that's a large individual, long arms. He's got much quicker feet. That's the crazy part about this guy. His feet are much more nimble and quick to move laterally up and down the line and get into the backfield, create some penetration. I mean, he's going to really keep those linebackers clean, but he's going to cause some disruption himself.
How did anybody in America run the ball against Florida with a 455-pound nose tackle and a 350-pound defensive tackle? How do you move those guys?
And then how also did they not just have the best goal line jumbo package in the world, right? I mean, throw both of those guys in an H-back, running back, and throw one in line and just say, try to stop me, man. We're going right.
You don't need the tush push if you got those two dudes running up and lining up in the backfield. But yeah, so Cam, and again, reading a lot about him, and everyone says the same kind of thing. He's a kind of football player that the Panthers are looking for as well. wanted to talk to you a little bit too about the fact that they didn't take a linebacker. A lot of these draft grades, and they've received great grades for the most part, but the one knock that they would get, and a lot that I've read at least, were the fact that a team that has a need for linebacker didn't really seem to take one. Now I know that the Falcons scooped one that we both loved right in front. They seem to do that quite a bit. Not only with just Xavier Watts, but the safety out of Oklahoma, I think they got two that we both liked, or the linebacker,
Danny
the linebacker, excuse me, the linebacker. But what was your thoughts on that? Is there anybody that maybe, now again, there's some undrafted free agents that I want to ask you about, and there's two in particular that do play linebacker, but was the value just not there? And it goes back to the same thing you were saying, they just stayed with their board?
That's what I would think. And there was another guy that I believe you and I spoke about on Friday as well, Smile Mondon Jr. Out of Georgia. He went to the Eagles. I believe it was like 2 or 3 picks right before us. And I personally blame myself for that, because literally right before that round, I was like, hey, man, Smile's still on the board. Like, this is the guy. If you're a Panthers fan and you're waiting on a linebacker, this is the guy. And then he went. So I'll take the blame for that. I apologize, Panther Nation. But I do think that it was just a case of, when that board fell the way that it did, they could either do what they did with DJ Johnson a few years back, where there was a run on a particular position. They kind of panic a little bit and say, well, we got to just get the next best guy in line at that position. I don't think they did that. I think that they stayed true. They like the fact that that probably also tells you they like what Trevin Wallace has done developmentally. They probably feel pretty comfortable about where they can get him. They really like Josie Jewell. They just signed the kid out of LA, Christian Roseboom. I think that they have high hopes for him. I think you're still going to see some free agents, the undrafted free agents that they got, maybe even some, we saw a lot of roster churning last year at the bottom half of our roster. When other teams started letting people go, we would pick them up. We were rotating a lot of guys in and out of the practice squad. I think that they're going to do that again with the bottom half of this roster.
Well, that's what it seems like. Seems like there's 3 seasons in the offseason. There's the initial free agency, then there's the draft, and then there's the second half of free agency, where you didn't get guys in the draft that you expected to get, or you didn't fill those positional needs. And that's where those other guys, and you still could get some good players. Now that you've drafted a guy, there's going to be other guys that were starters, pretty good players on other teams that come available as teams start trimming their fat a little bit.
Absolutely. There's going to be veterans that end up wanting to go somewhere else because there's a young guy nipping at their heels, right? And there's going to be teams that say, hey, we can save some money by letting some of these veterans go. And that's where Carolina maybe could be a little bit advantageous and say, well, look, this guy needs a job. We offer him a lower amount than he was getting paid at the old job, and see if he wants to come in here and compete, because we've got some reps available. Well, and if somebody were to get hurt, man, bring him in.
Yeah, Bobby Wagner last year, I think, is a prime example of that.
Great example.
Yeah, and
he was a huge impact for the Commanders, right?
That's right.
Huge.
That's right.
Yeah, and there are some free agent linebackers out there as well. If the Panthers decided to go that route, early, I think they probably will do the waiting game. A couple of linebackers they brought in. One of them I wanted to ask and see if you knew anything about this guy, Tuasivi Nomura out of Fresno State, linebacker. Again, I had not seen him play. Did some reading on him. Seems to be a very active player.
Yeah, so I hadn't done an evaluation on this guy. And somebody else asked me about him, and they're like, so tell me his scouting report, Ricky. And I'm like, I don't got one for you. But then once I realized that people were going to ask me about him, I was like, well, let me go develop one, right?
Yeah,
because now I know that he's a Panther. I know that people are going to ask about him. So I watched a little bit of him. I have not done a full evaluation. But the one thing that I remembered from the college football season, and this was a bad thing that I remembered, so that's why I was a little bit hesitant. I remember the game against Hawaii, where Fresno State had a lead, and they blew it in the fourth quarter. And Nomura actually gave up the pass interference penalty that put them in position to score the game-winning touchdown. So that's where his name stuck out to me. He's not a terrific coverage linebacker from the bits of film that I have gotten to with him, but he is an absolute hot motor type of defender. This guy is going to move constantly. He has a good nose for the football. He is undersized. I think that he came in at 219 pounds at the combine is what I found. That's a very light in the seat type of frame for a linebacker. And I'm a little bit interested to see if they have any interest in making him more of like a box big star type of player, if they are going to keep him on this roster, because I don't see this Carolina regime, right? Dan Morgan, the linebacker. I don't see them looking at this the way they're building these big players out on this defense. I have a hard time them saying, we trust a guy 220 pounds to not just get washed out against a bigger offensive lineman.
Ricky, I don't know if you can answer this or not. It's more of just a cultural question, with the Polynesian culture, and having played with a lot of guys from Hawaii, a lot of guys from Samoa, you get one of two types in that culture. You get a bone eating, they're going to eat the entire chicken type of guy that is going to just throw their hair back and come at you and hit you harder than anything you've been hit. Or there's that laid back, kind of yo man, smoking the reefer, surfing the waves type of guy. Ted McMillan, right? Coming from Arizona. I know that Arizona has a big Polynesian culture that go to there, as a lot of the teams do on the West Coast. And is he a guy that is going to compete and be that dog that you hope for, because that can overcome and make up for that, maybe that slight frame at 220 or 215 pounds, 212 pounds?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think that if you were to go off of just that one viral clip that's going around, right? His freshman year on a podcast when he's sitting there in the chow hall and he's just trying to get his meal down. And the guy's asking me, hey, man, you watch film? And he's like, nah, I don't watch film. Man, we watch film with our receiver group. I don't need to do it on my own type of thing, right? But then you listen to some of his teammates talk about him in the consequent years, the 2 seasons after that, right? This dude kept playing football even when he was injured for a lot of the times. He had his injury and he spoke to, I forget what outlet it was, but he spoke to somebody about the darkest time for him, the hardest time. And it was when he couldn't play football for an extended period of time because of his injury. He had to sit there and rest. And he was like, and it killed him because he loved football. It had become such a big part of his life that he did every single day that he almost felt naked, not being able to play football. That's perfectly fine for me. I honestly, I don't need to know too much more. He's not going to succeed in the NFL if he doesn't have that drive. And so it's up to him, right? Whether I think that he has it or not, it doesn't even matter. He's going to have to prove it himself. Yeah. But I do think that from what I gather, listening to teammates talk about him, listening to coaches talk about him, and then hearing that story from his words, I really do think that this guy loves football. I don't know that he's like the prototypical alpha necessarily, but I don't think he has to be that. I think as long as he enjoys football and wants to be great, cool with it.
Yeah, I read a story similar to what you just said, that he could have left in the portal after his junior year and got paid a lot. Alabama wanted him, and he decided to stick around, even though they didn't. Arizona have a great quarterback, but he felt loyalty and his buddies, and so I kind of dug that. And then I brought this up to Frank earlier. The other thing that made me feel a little bit better about it was finding out that the Rams, who haven't had a first round pick in 7 years, I believe, were trying to trade up and wanted to get him. And not only do they not miss many draft choices, they certainly don't miss many wide receiver draft choices. So that made me feel pretty good as well.
They're pretty smart about those wide receivers, man, and they know how to build an offense. That's one thing you can say about Sean McVay. They just let Cooper Kupp walk. They signed Devontae Adams. Puka Nacua was a 5th-round guy that they've turned into one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. So if they covet the guy that you got there at 8, you should feel pretty good about that.
That's exactly right. Let me ask you about another free agent that we just signed. Is a wide receiver out of Miami, Jacoby George. They gave him $214,000, which is a lot for those of the people that don't really know how much these guys get paid. And it's the same amount they actually paid Coker last year to get him to come to camp, and we see how that turned out. From what I've read about him, and I have seen him play a few times, nothing really stood out to me except the fact he does have a motor. I think I read that he also loses his temper quite a bit and gets some unsportsmanlike conduct, calls. But he does look like he at least plays hard and has good hands, but not maybe that fast. Is that really what his issue was?
Yeah, he's not a long speed. Like, he's not going to test well. And it's interesting because that Miami offense, that was one of the most dynamic offenses in the nation. And they had Samuel Brown, Xavier Restrepo, and then Jacoby George were their 3 wide receivers. But then they had Elijah Arroyo, the tight end, who ended up being the highest drafted a skill position player for the Hurricanes. Yeah. But what Jacoby George brings is almost like that glue factor, right? He's going to be one of those, fire up the team. He's going to do the dirty work if you need him. I think that he can, if you move on those pre-snap motions, I think he could be one of those guys that blocks into the B gap or the C gap from a wide receiver alignment. He doesn't mind sticking his nose into the business. I think that he's got a little after the catch ability. I think that really what I see when I see that undrafted free agent priority signing, if you will, is that they want him to be one of the guys competing. And then they also signed Kobe Hudson, the wide receiver out of Central Florida. They bring in Moose Muhammad's son, Moose Muhammad III out of Texas A&M. And then the Hunter Renfrow signing. I think what they're showing you right there is that David Moore isn't going to be our wide receiver 5 just because we only have 5 wide receivers available. They're saying whoever is wide receiver 5 and whoever is wide receiver 6, they earn that position. And Jimmy Horn is going to have a say in that as well. You're going to have 5 or 6 guys fighting for 2 jobs, and that's a great thing, man.
Now, if we can just get the second half Bryce Young to show up in the first half and then continue on in the second half, I think we can have something on offense.
Yes, sir. I agree completely, man.
Were you surprised they didn't really address corner as well? I mean, again, the corner draft was not as strong as obviously the defensive line and all that anyway. So you knew that once there was a pretty good run. But even late in the draft, there was a few guys out there that I liked, and I know that you liked, that they could have taken and didn't. They definitely need to add some DBs. I mean, they've got their starters, but behind that, they definitely need to add a couple. And I did see that they brought a couple in already on the undrafted free agent. They could also address that with free agency. But anyone that you saw in free agency that you liked when it comes to giving some depth there?
Not particularly. I think that what it does, again, the same sentiment that we've talked about, like Mitchell Evans, right? That might have been a guy that they didn't anticipate being there at that spot. And then when he stayed there, they might have even evaluated that against some of those corners that were still on the board and said, well, look, we've got Mitchell rated so much higher. Do we take the positional need or do we take the higher rated player? When you're in the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds, though, I really don't think you should be banking on finding a starter anyways, right? You're looking for the best reserve players that you can find to build depth, to build special teams. And I think what they're showing here, they're not afraid to lean into that train of thinking as opposed to saying, we've got a hole here at our cornerback 3. What do? We need to just go fill that. Or you wait until every other team turns out the bottom of their rosters and think of how many corners we signed last year. Mike Jackson, who was our cornerback 2, wasn't on our roster until after the first wave of cuts. He played the entire season as our second cornerback. So if they're comfortable with that, I think they're going to be comfortable with the other guys.
Yeah. So last thing before we let you go, I know you got to run. Out of the undrafted free agent guys they signed, I know there's one in particular, I think Luke Kander, that you like, the center from Cincinnati. But is there one other than him that you really got in? And I know a lot of people don't care about these guys, but these are the kind of guys that
centers are people too now. Come on.
Well, but what I'm saying is a lot of the undrafted free agent guys that are signed.
You might find your Fred Lane in that situation.
Or Coker last year was one. And so I think this year, people are going to pay attention to those names more than they had in the past. Is there one that you really are excited about?
So Luke Kandra is my favorite that they signed. I had a 4th round grade on him. I think that he's got a really good projection as a utility interior offensive lineman. I think he could play both guard spots, but I think that he projects really well as a developmental center. His movement ability, but also his stout anchoring ability. I mean, this guy put up 33 reps at 225 at the combine. This is one of these stronger guys. He's got, I think, 32.5, 33-inch arms. So they're not short, but they are built more for the inside. Where he had a little bit of trouble was with speed rushers outside on his own. But if you put him inside and you've got him, look, if he ends up being your center and he is, bookended by Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt, you're giving him a pretty good starting point there. Like he's got some good help next to him. Kobe Hudson, though, would be the other player that I would talk about. And that's the wide receiver out of Central Florida we mentioned earlier. I do think that he is a dog. I think he's got that athletic ability that you look for. He's got some explosive plays under his belt. I believe he averaged about 16.2 yards per reception. So they do manufacture good looks for him. He played even better when they had Javon Baker on that offense the year prior. He ended up getting drafted by the Patriots in 23. But I really think, or 24, I really do think that Kobe Hudson is a guy that can make some noise and is going to fight for that wide receiver 6 or 7 spot.
Awesome. Well, Ricky, thank you for joining us, man. Tell everybody where they can find you on socials and podcast.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, guys. You can find me. My handle is right there above my head, luckily, at Ricky Bowbody. That's my Twitter name. You can find me on Panthers on Tap, on Draft Crush. Both are shows available on YouTube, X, any of the audio platforms that you find stuff. And then any cool shows like the Suit Up Sports with DJ Stout and Frank Garcia that are willing to have me, you can find me on there also.
Well, Ricky, if there's ever anything we can do for you, let us know, and we'd be more than happy to kind of return the favor.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that, Frank.
Yep.
Thank you, Ricky. When we come back, Frank and I are going to jump into a little Shedeur.
You're listening to Suit Up Sports.
Suit Up Sports.
Here's your host, DJ The Suit Stout.
Welcome back, Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ The Suit Stout, along with Frank Garcia, Big D over there producing the show. Want to thank Ricky Raines for joining us. The last segment, he does a great job, man. And not only is he just a huge Panther guy, but, man, he studies the guys. And it's not just something he does a month before the draft. It's a year-round deal.
Yeah, and he's also a local guy. Went to Myers Park. You don't find too many of those unicorns here in the city. But he loves the Panthers. He loves his team. And, he's obviously very knowledgeable about what he's talking about.
Yeah, I went to West Charlotte, and when he told me he went to Myers Park, I was going to see if he knew some of the guys that I used to play sports with, but then I realized that he's a lot younger than I am, so I could probably have been his teacher. But no, right. Ricky does a good job, and thank him again for joining us. Let's get into now. We covered the Panthers, and now the one thing that everyone was
How
sick.
deep do you want to dive?
Yeah, and everyone was sick of hearing about Shedeur Sanders. We all were. I think everybody was like, my God.
The draft became about Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, and then here's the thing. Listen, before the draft, I thought Shedeur. I watched every single Colorado game last year, and I watched every single Jackson State game the year before that. Deion had a series they would do where they would go through, and I was hooked on it. I loved it.
It was called Deion, actually, whatever.
Yeah, and so I've watched Shedeur's every one of his games the past 2 years. I think the kid's a good quarterback. I thought he would be drafted in the first round, and I was very surprised he wasn't. When the Giants went Abdul Carter at 3, you start hearing stories about how Shedeur showed up to the meeting with their head coach Brian Daboll. He asked him to put a couple plays on the board that he had asked him to prepare for. Shedeur not only didn't do it, had an attitude about it. Then you hear other stories about him wearing headphones while he's doing an interview with the coach and
a FaceTime call.
And music still on his headphones. All of his buddies.
Very disrespectful from those camps that were claiming that he did not. One of the worst interviews that he's ever had.
Right, and here's the thing, even the folks that didn't think Shedeur was a top, let's just say 3 quarterback in the draft, because I think pretty much everyone had him top 3, if not top 5.
Not me.
But I know you've not been a fan. But even the ones who didn't have him ranked top 3 or 4 or 5 quarterback, all of them thought that he would be drafted before the 5th round.
Absolutely.
And so that's why it was such a big story. And then on top of that, when you add who his father is, and listen, one of the things that I want to draw a comparison to here, and this is going to open up a can of worms, but it's just the facts. We both are fathers who coached our sons. We had dads who coached us. We get it. A dad's going to do the best they can for their kids, and every father should do that. But they also need to know when to put the brakes on. And we've had 2 controversies in the past couple months when it comes to father and his son in sports. LeBron James getting his son into the NBA. Obviously, that was longer than 2 months ago. But then the whole thing with Stephen A. Smith.
He bullied the NBA. He didn't just get him. He bullied the NBA.
Yeah, by saying if anybody else drafts him,
to drafting Bron.
Right. If anybody drafts him, he won't play there. He had the agent call, no doubt. And then now this with Deion Sanders, which Deion's, he throughout the year, I'm going to pick the team he goes to, or he's not going to go there. He's not. Ironically, one of the teams that Deion
said he wasn't going to go to
was Cleveland, and obviously he's in Cleveland. So, I see why it was obviously a big story for a while, because no one, in the history of the draft, by the way, there's never been a slide like that.
That's not true.
Never. Not a player that was unanimously thought of as being.
Who are they saying unanimous? These prognosticators that know as much about you and I.
Any analyst in any mock draft, and I'm not talking about mock drafts that are done by Joe McGillicuddy just because he likes football.
Because Todd McShay or Milton Kiper said that this guy was going to be number 1 pick, doesn't make this guy number 1
even
pick. Other
guys who you read that have had, Bucky Brooks, guys have good track records of being good talent evaluators, and even talent evaluators before the draft. What I'm saying is that no one thought he was going to slide to 5, so that's why it became a big story. The stories that started coming out afterwards about his attitude, the way he was in interviews. Some people say he conducted himself that way on teams he didn't want to go to, which I'm not buying that, because he wanted to go to the Giants. They really wanted him to go to the Giants. So I'm not going to buy that as an excuse. It sounds to me like he is entitled, and he did have a bad attitude in a lot of these interviews. And now, like I said, a lot of anonymous sources from teams are coming out, and it was an interesting deal to watch him slide. When Cleveland finally takes him, I was shocked because they took Gabriel in the second round, who's a quarterback out of Oregon. I'm not high on him at all, but when you take him in the second round, and you also have already a quarterback room with Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, and then they take Shedeur in the fifth. Now, they said they were sticking to the board. I think the owner went in there and said, take the kid, take him. But regardless, what were your thoughts? I mean, obviously, I think when anybody was watching the slide, I think it's natural. I had a little compassion for him, whether you like the kid or not. And I don't dislike the kid, by the way, because I've seen a lot of other interviews with him where I thought the kid was a stand-up kid. But I had a little compassion, obviously, for him as the slide went on. But were you just totally shocked? Not that he fell out of the first round, but it didn't go when Cleveland picked it the second round, and when New Orleans took again in the second round. Were you as shocked as I was?
Yeah, I think so. As far as how far he fell, to the fifth round. But, DJ, this is not necessarily Shedeur's fault. He has to take some responsibility for this. But this is, unfortunately, a culture that is starting to rear its ugly head a lot more with fathers that have had, great careers, that are forcing their agenda and their will on leagues. You saw it happen in LA with LeBron and Bronny, and you saw Stephen A. Smith react to that, right? What's ironic is now, I feel like the same thing has happened with, like you do, with Deion, forcing his will on the NFL, and the NFL said, no, we're not going to fall for that. And Stephen A. making it a racial thing or a collusion thing. The whole entire NFL is against it. No, that has nothing to do with it. You look at a kid that, in my opinion, was good, but not great, right? Cam Ward may be a little better, but not great. But he didn't have the baggage that went along with that, right? So because you're good and not great, I knew this as a player from the time that I started high school. I couldn't get in trouble. You know why? Because I wasn't good enough. If I wanted to make it to the NFL, I had to have a clean slate. I couldn't drink and drive. I couldn't have the black marks, the black flags on my side, because then nobody would have drafted me.
Yep.
I can't come into an organization, even as a player that had played 4 or 5 years, and demand things as an average player. The only people that can do that are the great elite players. If Shedeur was Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, you fill in the blank, and Andrew Luck, that were going to be great players, and we're making these demands, it's a different story, right? But because he's an average player, and a lot of people saw him in a weak quarterback draft as an average player, maybe just a good player, you can't come in there and make those demands and expect teams to jump all over you just because you're Deion Sanders' son and because you have a high completion percentage. There's nothing that makes this kid great as far as his size, his arm strength, his speed. He doesn't stand out. And on top of that, now you're going to tell me that I'm going to dictate to you as a place that I want to go for employment, and I'm going to tell you what you need to do in order to make me happy. No, it doesn't work that way.
Well, and it's funny, especially not in the NFL, because as a rookie, regardless whether you're the number one pick in the draft or not, when you walk into an NFL locker room, and I've heard this only because of guys like you that have worked for me or I've talked to, will say this right away. They're not putting up with that. You're already hard on rookies as it is, even the number one pick in the draft. So if you got a guy coming in that's been saying this and saying that and all those sorts of things, as a general manager of a football team, doggone well, that's an easy way to fracture your locker room. And then on top
especially when you're the quarterback.
Especially when you're the quarterback.
You're supposed to be looked upon as the leader of the organization. If you're in Colorado and people are used to you, if you're Cam Newton, people are used to you. If you're Shedeur Sanders and people are used to you, if you're Deion Sanders and you're not Deion Sanders, bud.
Right.
Sorry. you're Deion Sanders' son.
Yeah.
And if you were Deion Sanders and you had that type of ability, then you might be able to have a little bit more of this attitude and this cockiness that exists with the arrogance that it comes across as, right? And that's the problem. What upsets me even more, and I get worked up with this stuff, because when those same people like Stephen A. and all the other people that are watching this and talking about talking about Shedeur in this situation, when it starts becoming race, give me a flipping break. This has nothing to do with race in a league where it's 75 to 80% African American, right? You had, out of the first 32 players drafted, 28 of them were black players. Mm-hmm. So to sit there and make this a racial thing, you have a number one quarterback who is a black player. It has nothing to, this is a cultural issue. This is a cultural problem that has started. And you know who's responsible for this? Everybody's going to blame the NIL and college football. It's not college football's fault. You know whose fault it is? My fault. Your fault. Every dad out there, it's your fault for allowing your son to think that he is deserving or entitled to an opportunity. This is a luxury, and we've gotten away from that. The game doesn't owe you anything, right? It's a luxury to be able to play those things. You have to earn the right. And what we've gotten away from is giving these kids entitlement, saying they deserve a chance. He deserves to start. I do this, so he deserves. No, you don't deserve anything. You have to earn. And I am so thankful that the NFL decided to say, you're not going to tell us in a league that makes us great, that's made us great, that we're going to give you anything. Now, has that happened before? Yes. Obviously it has, but those players were special anomalies. They weren't the everyday rule. Shedeur Sanders he's not a special player as of yet. Now, here's the great thing, Shedeur, and I'm sure that I don't have to tell you, and I'm sure your dad, I'm not sure how he's pumping you up, and I'm sure he's blaming everybody else for your fall. And it's nobody else's fault except for your own in this situation, because you were going to be drafted, as a top pick. You created this situation so that you fell because of your attitude. The only way that this is going to get fixed, DJ, is that if he goes out there and he earns the opportunity to play, because he has the opportunity. There's been a lot of quarterbacks that have been third, fourth, fifth, sixth round, seventh. Brock Purdy, 7th round. Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, 6th round. The NFL, you're not done. You just aren't going to be entitled, and they're knocking you down a peg, and you may not like it. That's tough, but now you have to earn it.
Well, few things. Number one, I totally agree with you on the race thing. And I know people watching or listening can go, well, yeah, 2 white guys sitting there. Of course they're going to.
I'm not white. I'm Hispanic.
Oh, true. Okay.
The NFL wasn't making a big deal when this angry Mexican that was undersized, didn't get drafted. And I deserve 1st round draft status. I played 10 years. I was a backup all pro. I deserve more.
I'm with you.
Nobody's making a big deal about that.
And the majority of the news coverage that I've seen, everyone agrees, whether they're white or black. Now, Stephen A. Smith, there's a couple others that, I know that Skip Bayless came out with some stuff, but
those are blowhards just trying to create news.
Yeah, their job is to try to create and stir up people.
They're stirring up news.
And I get it, but the majority of folks, at least the ones that I normally agree with a lot of what Stephen A. Smith says. I totally disagree with him there. And imagine it this way, and this is, if I was having a conversation with someone like Stephen A. Smith or someone who was sitting there, Skip Bayless, here's what I would say to them. And I think at least Stephen A. is not only knowledgeable enough, he obviously is, but also I think he's objective enough to maybe understand this. If my son Dylan, our producer, Big D, he's got his college degree in business finance, he's got his cybersecurity certificate. If he gets a big interview for a job and he walks back in the door and I say, hey, buddy, how's the interview? And he's wearing, a sweatshirt. His hair's not combed. His fingernails are long with dirt under them.
Your impression is not going to be a favorable one. My
point is you did not do what you needed to do. If you don't get the job, it's your fault, because look at the way you dressed. Were you prepared? And if he does that and on several occasions, I'm going to sit there and say, look, bud, these are job interviews for your life. When Shedeur was going to these interviews with these teams, whether it be on Zoom or in person, those are job interviews. And Stephen A. Smith is a guy who has been through a lot of controversy. ESPN, Shannon Sharp now off the air with him. There ain't no way Stephen A. Smith is walking into a job interview with headphones around. I can guarantee
he might
that.
be now, because he is that guy, but not when he first started. He had to earn the right to be able to do that. And because he has earned that through his hard work and through his credibility, right, he might have a better opportunity or chance to be able to still get one of those top jobs if he were to do that. But not when he first started. Shedeur is first starting. He's not Deion Sanders.
Right.
And that's the problem, DJ. He acted like he was his father's protege. And just because you have the last name doesn't give you the credibility or the entitlement to going out there and being your father.
Yeah, and listen, and NIL, because I totally agree with everything you said right there as far as, what the core problem is. NIL then is like sprinkling gasoline on it.
Oh gosh, they enable that type of entitlement.
Sure, because now you have that, and Shedeur made $6 million last year. He's on TV commercials. He's going to make this year if he makes the Browns out of a 5th round pick $350,000. So he would have been better to stay in schools like you were from Texas quarterback. He would have made $7 million. He didn't get drafted until the 7th round.
What have I said to you a million times? And I learned this, and I heard this from a guy who I feel like is really a knowledgeable guy and a worldly guy. And I'm going to give him a lot of credit because he said this and it stuck with me because he's 100% right. Brenton Buckner. When we were doing a radio show, he said, money doesn't make you this. Money doesn't make you that. Money doesn't make you smarter. It doesn't make you a better businessman. It doesn't make you a better dad. Money doesn't do any of those things. All money does is make you more of who you are. Right? Money, when you get it, if you're a nice person, you know what, you're going to be a charitable guy. If you're a giving person, you're going to give a lot. If you're a greedy person, you're going to hoard it. If you're a arrogant person, you're going to flaunt it. Right? Money just makes you more of who you already are, and that's what the NIL is doing for these kids without having to really have experienced that work ethic that it takes to get to the top. And the NFL has been about that. No longer is the NFL about, and that's, I feel like, what the NFL was doing in this situation was making a stand that we are still the NFL. You are not going to come in here and dictate to us how things are. There have been many players before you. There will be many players after you. That this league is still going to be profitable because we stick to our standards in this.
And look, if I'm playing devil's advocate, and I have no problem playing devil's advocate, the people who think that race had something to do with this point to Eli Manning saying that I'm not playing for San Diego, in which case San Diego had to make a trade with the Giants. They look back at John Elway when he said, I'm not going to play for the Colts, and he sat out and played baseball. So, the two things I would say about that is,
what's the difference between him and the kid from Tennessee that decided he wanted to go get $4 million, right? The difference is that those guys had the pedigree and the tag of being the greatest at their position, transcending player. Shedeur was never going to be one of those guys. The kid from Tennessee that transferred to UCLA was never that guy, right? So it's a different story, and it's a huge risk to go out there and demand and bully and pigeonhole somebody into making you feel like if you don't do this, all those guys took a risk. Luck took a risk by going back to college. Manning took a risk by saying, I'm not going to play here at San Diego and you're going to trade me. Elway took a risk. They all took risks. But the difference is that they were that transcending great player, projected to be that great player, versus a guy that's just a good player.
Well, and I would agree with that. I mean, Elway and Eli Manning were both thought to be generational players. Yeah, and Shedeur, no one has said that for sure. So I think that's a little different. And the time, and that was a long time ago. That was before NIL money. That was before all these things. The kids, the players back then, the football back then, the general managers back then. And this is another thing. And I like Deion Sanders, and I like Deion Sanders.
I do too. I love him as a coach.
Things. There's things that he'll say or tweet sometimes that I'm like, why is he saying that? Same as I love, like Donald Trump. I'm like, man, why you got to tweet that, man? Just but I do like Deion. But the other thing, and this was, I don't think this is being talked about enough. I think everyone's talking about the interviews that Shedeur had, and I think all that makes sense as to why he fell. The last part of it, is my opinion, is that these teams they also don't want to deal with Deion in the media going, well, you know what? They lost 42-7. Shedeur should have been starting. Like LeVar Ball syndrome, where these coaches don't want to be second guessed by Deion in the media. And for people to say that Deion wouldn't do that, I think everyone would not be shocked if he did it.
Let me give you a quote from Deion Sanders himself. Let me see if I can find it. My son, how are you going to handle that interview with Cleveland when you go in there? Deion has demanded to be in that first interview with Cleveland. This was a question asked to Deion Sanders. It will be handled accordingly. Shedeur don't take no backseat to any quarterback, period.
Exactly.
That's how that's going to be handled.
And let me tell you something. And that's where Cleveland is going to have either Shedeur is going to be humbled by this, which, by the way, his tweets and social media after that, I did feel where he thanked God. He was just happy to be. He said, I just want to go play football. He said the right things after
you
this.
Can't thank God and not be humble at the same time, because those things don't coincide.
But my point is, after he got drafted, after the slide of 5 rounds, I think his reply after that, I thought, was showed some humility. I'm just ready to go play football. The kind of things that if he said when he's getting interviewed with Brian Daboll, I just want to play football. And I think that probably would have bode him well.
Do you think he learned his lesson?
It remains to be seen. And
do you think he learned his lesson? Do you think he's pandering? Do you think he's pandering to the teams so that he comes across as humble, or do you think this has humbled him?
Here's what I think. I think there's no way it couldn't have humbled him some. And the reason I say is because, and you know this, the guys with the biggest egos, when they do get embarrassed or when they do get...
What do they do?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, they fight harder usually.
That's right.
But
they become more outgoing, more outspoken. They become louder. They don't get humble.
Well, he hasn't been louder yet, and he's got a job that he has to win now because there's a loaded quarterback room. I'm not saying there's many good quarterbacks in that room. And if he takes that to the field, which, by the way, no one has ever questioned his competitiveness on the field, his toughness, all those things. So I think he's going to take that probably with a big chip on his shoulder and go compete and see what happens. Now, here's where this takes another turn. What if he's lighting it up in camp, and you know what, comes time for them to pick their 3 quarterbacks, and you got Flacco and you got
Flacco would be gone,
or what if he's the best and they want him to start the games? And then
Flacco?
Yeah. I mean, Flacco 2 years ago, they would
150 years old. You got to move on from Flacco.
I wouldn't disagree, but they brought him in for a reason. Then you've got Pickett and whoever else, Gabriel. What if he doesn't make the team and he's on the practice squad? Now, then you got Watson, you got Watson's out for the year, and he'll never play there.
You have
you got Pickett, you got Flacco, you got Gabriel,
and Gabriel. Gabriel, who you drafted, that's going to be more of the interesting part of this, right? You got a 4th rounder or 3rd rounder, wherever they took Gabriel.
They took him in the 2nd, I believe,
or the 2nd rounder, or whatever it is.
Pretty sure 2nd.
They took him before you, right? And now you're going to be behind him on the depth chart.
Yep.
How is that? How are you going to handle this, right? Because now you have an opportunity, right? And this is if you're humbled, what are you going to do? You're going to shut the heck up and you're going to go to work, and you're not going to say a word. If you haven't, every time that kid makes a play, you're going to be hating on him. Every time that he misses a play, I could have done that better. You could potentially be one of 2 things, right? You could be the cancer in the room, right? That nobody's going to ever do better than you because you're getting slighted, or you're going to be the guy that says, you know what, I'm a good teammate. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to root for you, and we're going to work together, and I'm going to work on my game. You're going to work on your game, but together, which one do you think that he's going to be for Cleveland? Because it's an easy answer for me.
You think he's going to still be an issue?
You can't help yourself if that's what you're brought up with, right? That takes time to heal from. Those things take time. You don't just get humbled and still make it to the. That's like me punishing you and saying, I'm going to take away your iPad and give it to you, 2 days later, right? That's the same thing that's happened here. Until you realize that the actual consequences are there, right? That's only going to be the only thing that humbles you.
Well, he just learned as big of a consequence as he's ever learned in his life by falling to the 5th round when he thought he was going to be possibly a top 3 pick in the draft, and he did it in front of the entire country who was watching the draft and reading about the draft.
And by the way, I don't condone. I hate what happened
with the prank call.
I mean, there's no place for that. right?
I totally agree.
And there has to be something
done. And now a lot of
done.
players are coming out. It happened to probably 10 of them.
There has to be something done with the protection of these players, identities. I don't care who it is, and I know that it's a lot harder with social media and the iPads and things that go out there, and but those things should never happen. That moment should have never been taken away and given to I feel terrible for Shedeur with that. I still have empathy towards him when it comes to those things. I just think that sometimes, you have to make stands in order to teach lessons, and they're hard lessons, and it's tough love. You don't want to punish your child knowing that he did something wrong, right? But you have to in order for him to grow. So when he faces the real world, he's not going to get knocked down and then wonder why.
Well, I want to finish on Shedeur, and then I want to bring up one more thing. As far as Shedeur goes, I do think, as competitive as he is, I think when he gets in camp and it's his turn to get his reps in, I think he'll give it 100%, and we'll just see what he is as a quarterback. Locker room stuff, I also would say this, and I've been in locker rooms, you've been in NFL locker rooms. Usually, if somebody is out of line from that standpoint, the locker room takes care of itself in a lot of ways, especially with rookies, I would think, and especially with the rookie.
Call it code red.
And especially with the rookie who's going to come in with more money than a lot of the guys that played on the team last year. So I think the locker room takes care of a lot of that. I think he'll compete his butt off. The rest remains to be seen. Here's what I want to end the show with. And I was thinking about this after the draft was over. And we saw several players, Shedeur being one of them, yours, the quarterback from Texas, being the other big one, that chose to come out of college. And again, everyone agreed that Shedeur should have. Everyone thought he'd be a first-round pick. Yours, everyone thought would probably be top 3 pick for a third round, maybe
probably
fourth.
Second or third round. Third round is the latest.
Well, we saw, and there's a lot more guys than those guys that came out for the draft and now lost a lot of money by not staying at college. Yours was going to make $7 million. Shedeur, I think, would have made another $6 million. And there's a lot of guys that might have made $1 million. So if you're drafted in the fifth.
So what you're telling me is Carson Beck did the right thing by going to Miami and taking 4.5?
100%. And that's what I'm going to end with is this. I think in this case, this draft is going to, we're going to look back in 10 years and it's going to show a few things. One thing will be, was Shedeur Sanders worthy of being a number 1 pick, or were they right? The other thing I think is going to happen is this. I think this is going to make college football a lot better, because I think a lot of players now are going to go, man, wait a minute. So they're offering me $3 million. I know Mel Kiper and my agent's telling me that I should be a third-round pick, which would make this much. But man, those dudes fell 2 rounds. At least here, it's guaranteed. Like it's walking away from a guaranteed.
I don't know how that makes college football better.
Because the good players.
I think what it does is it keeps players in longer.
Right, which makes it better. But it doesn't
necessarily mean they're going to continue to be on the same team, because that problem still exists. Until you fix that problem, and now you say we have a contract, whatever it might be. Now, I think now we can say now that will help that be better. Well, but until you fix the free agency in college football right now, or basketball, or the NIL in general, college basketball or football is not going to be better.
There's obviously more steps that need to be taken. But what it is going to do, I think, because of these guys who lost so much money in this draft, it's going to happen in the NBA draft as well in June. Same thing.
Let me make sure I get this straight, so I don't make an argument that, or come to an argument that I'm wrong with,
right,
or a bad conclusion. In the NBA, if you declare, you can always come back.
If you hire an agent, you cannot.
But you can declare, as long as you don't hire an agent and come back.
Correct.
Right?
You do it in football.
The NFL, once you declare, you're in.
Once you get an agent, it all still.
No, I don't think.
NFL, you declare, but you have an agent. If you don't have an agent, then you can declare. But no one it doesn't happen in the NFL like it does in the NBA.
Okay.
NBA guys pull themselves out quite a bit.
They come out for their ego to say, okay, I'm an NBA player. Let me see let me test the water, see what people say, and then let me go back to my college and play another year.
Yep. And so what I think the NFL draft that we just watched is going to do. And there obviously are other steps with the NIL that have to happen with the portal. But what I do think it's going to do is that it's going to make the talent pool a lot better, regardless of if these guys transfer, because now guys like yours, who's one of the top 10 college quarterbacks last year, Shedeur Sanders, and I have a list. There's probably 15 guys in particular that lost.
How bad would Tennessee take yours right now?
Exactly. And
I
so
mean, Tennessee would give him $4.5 million, don't you think?
Easy.
He's already making what, $5
he
or
was
6
already offered $7 million
at Texas.
So these guys,
but he's not. But I mean, now you have Manning coming up.
Well,
so what are you going to do with that?
I want to say it was Michigan State that offered him a ton, but my point is, whether they transfer or not, it's going to keep the talent pool stronger for college football, because a lot of these guys that would be leaving, that would be getting replaced by a freshman or a guy that maybe isn't good enough, it's going to make these rosters deeper, in my opinion, because a lot of guys, if I'm serious, if I'm a dad or an agent and everyone seems to think my son's going in the 3rd round, which his salary would be, I don't know what the 3rd round, well, let's just say 5th round. Shedeur Sanders, $350,000.
Yeah, I made this argument, when the NIL first started. I said, why wouldn't you declare for free agency? Right, you're going to make more money in college football than you would in the NFL draft.
Yep.
Especially if you know you're not going to be a first rounder.
Yep.
If you know you're going to be a 2nd or 3rd rounder, there's a potential you might be. Stay in college football, maximize your earning potential, do it as long as you can, make as much money as you can, because you only have a short window of opportunity to make the most amount of money. It's unlike any other profession. You make your money early,
yep,
and then you don't have anything late. Where most other companies or organizations, you make little and you grow. And you grow and you grow. Here, you're given a lot up front. And then once you're done with that 8, 10 years, 12 years, if you're lucky, if you're really lucky, 12 years, then, what do you have left? What do you have to sustain that?
No doubt. And listen, Shedeur Sanders, like I said, got drafted in the 5th round. His salary is $350,000. He would have made $6 million if he stayed.
He's lost almost $6 million.
Yours even more. So
I think his entire 4-year contract in the NFL is going to be worth what he would have made in 1 year. So he's losing 3 years of earning potential at $6 million.
And it's twofold as well. And you're going to go back to college with a chance to move up in the draft next year. If you go and have a great, I know you can sit there and go, you could also stink it up, but
or you could also get hurt.
True. But best case scenario, and I think what an agent and a father would say, mother would say, is that, you know what, instead of making $350, make the $6 million, get back to school and improve your draft stock for next year, where you'd already made the $6 million now in the draft.
Well, I think what it's going to do is it's going to curtail a lot of the early exits of guys that weren't going to be 1st round picks. So just to go to the NFL where you used to have to go to make money, right? Now you're making more in college football than you are in the NFL, especially as your rookie or 2nd or 3rd year, unless you're the guy, the top guy. And there's only going to be 1 or 2 of those in the entire NFL and the entire college football. If you're not one of those 2 guys, might as well stay and make more money.
You can't tell me that if you are a player that's going to get drafted in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round in the NFL.
I tell you, you're stupid if you did.
Yeah, right, because you can't. Not one of the guys that were drafted in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, not one of them would not have been able to enter the portal and make more than $350,000, $250,000. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So even at the small schools, they could enter the portal and go get paid. So I really do think this is going to be a good thing for college football and basketball once they do fix the other things we talked about.
I don't know basketball. I don't know if basketball, it'll affect basketball.
Well, I think it will basketball as well, because I think in basketball guys can leave after 1 year, and I think
they have guaranteed contracts. I mean, I think it's a little. I would agree with your argument with football. I'm not going to agree with it.
Well, in the NBA, if you're not drafted in the top 15, your money's not crap. I mean, so unless you're going to be a top 15 pick, or unless you just hate school, which obviously ties into some of this as well. But if you're not a top 15 pick in the NBA draft, they're saying that you're much better staying in school because the money will be more. I mean, Kneppel from Duke is a guy that, everyone said he should be a lock at top 10 pick. But I was seeing an article that for some reason he did fall to 50s.
They all say that without really understanding the Europeans and all the global powers that are going to come into the draft, and people are going to fall in love with them because they're getting 23-year-old men versus an 18-year-old kid.
Right. So it remains to be seen, but I do think it will roll over into basketball, because I do think there's going to be guys who look at it and go, man, Duke or Carolina's offering me $3 million, $2 million, and if I get picked 18 through 25, I'm going to make this much. And it's guaranteed. But again, it'll depend on what year the guy is, if he's a senior or a junior. But if you're a freshman choosing to come out and you can stay 1 more year and make more money and then improve your job, I just think it's going to help the depth and the talent pool. But there's a long way to go, because it could be a system that is great. Right now, it's a system that is just nuts, and it's the wild
The
west.
point of it is that Shedeur lost a lot of money.
Shedeur and yours, and
there's a lot of other players that did the same by making a choice to go and come out early to go to the NFL or to their prospective sport, so that they could just be called NFL players.
I will say this: I will be one at least watching and how Shedeur does, and hoping that he does well, and hoping that maybe he does show that he's been humbled a bit and can get in there, because the players that play with him all say he's a great leader. We can argue that back and forth, but the players seem to like him. You can see, you hear these interviews.
Teammates are always going to say what everybody wants to hear.
You're not wrong about that for the most part, no doubt, until they're not playing with you. So
until they're not playing with you.
So then it's a whole different ballgame.
You start hearing the truth.
A lot of times, and so far the players have been on his side, so we'll see. That's all for today. We covered a lot, man. It was fun. The draft weekend was fun. Now the rookie camp's upcoming, and then football will be quiet for a while.
We still have another period of free agency ready to happen. So keep your fingers crossed. The Panthers can get some of those holes that they missed, and maybe the draft, some of the things that you talked about with Ricky Raines, and maybe the Panthers will be able to patch up some of those deficiencies.
I think they will. And Friday we'll be talking some NBA playoffs, and not necessarily breaking the games down as much as just the difference between NBA playoff basketball and basketball back when we grew up, when we loved the Hornets and loved the NBA. It's totally
the NBA
different.
Playoffs is an indictment on the regular season.
Man, it's like watching two different leagues. It's unbelievable, but they've been fun to watch. And then also the NHL. We probably mix in a little baseball. I did want to try to get into the Savannah Bananas a little bit today, because I don't know if you saw that story is nuts, but we'll save that for Friday as well.
Savannah Bananas is nuts?
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's crazy. Sold out Clemson Stadium 2 times in a row. Thank you, Big D, over there at the production chair. I always forget to thank Big D at the end, because I feel like I'm in a rush to hit the clock. But Dylan, thank you as usual. You do a great job, and we'll see you Friday.